Welcome to the Alchemy of Business Show with your host, Steve Rodgers. The Alchemy of Business Show is a podcast that mixes practical, actionable business solutions with soulful insights for anyone seeking deeper meaning in their lives and greater success in their work. Steve will be featuring purpose-driven leaders from all walks of life and getting insight into their journeys from failures to triumphs. So tune in to transition, transform, and evolve in every dimension of your business and life. And now your host of the Alchemy of Business Show, Steve Rodgers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alchemy of Business Show. Thank you for either listening in or if you're viewing this in video audio format, welcome to you as well. No matter how you got here, we are thrilled that people want to come and learn more about making wiser decisions, creating greater profits in your life and in your family, and also having higher purpose. So we're combining all of those things in the alchemy of business, just as I do with my clients in the Alchemy Advisors business. So today we have a guest that exudes that. Talk about someone who has a formula for using the alchemy of his own life at a very high level. This gentleman is a serial entrepreneur, and he's done tons of business. He's based out of the Silicon Valley area. But not only is he a serial entrepreneur of building many, many businesses, but he's also been in the publishing business back in the ancient days of publishing to the current day in ways in which he's changing the industry. I actually met him via my book that I had published through him called The Iggy Principles. And what was fascinating about when we work together is he does multimedia books that I'm going to have him talk about. So it's not just the old fashioned way. He's more than current and cutting edge. He is a two-time TEDx speaker. He's his own international best-selling author with over 60 books. I believe that his publishing companies over the years have published over like 700 plus books. And we were talking earlier before we started the show, he himself with interviews and his own type of podcast or shows had done close to edging into almost 1,000 different interviews he's done for some of the credibility work that he does. So I'm thrilled to have Mr. Mitchell Levy here, who has so many titles underneath. I'm just going to call him Mitchell. So let's bring on Mitchell and welcome him to the show. So thank you, Mitchell.
Oh, Steve, that was a beautiful intro. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, we are glad to have you. So the Alchemy of Business is getting its feet wet and starting to roll and rumble. We are probably going to be at about the 10th show by the time we have your show here hitting the whole airways for everybody. And some people will be seeing this live, actually. So for those of you that get to see this live, you're going to get a preview of this with Mitchell. And for those of you that might see this later on when you're not seeing it live, you're still going to get his wisdom. And Mitchell, some of the people we've had on are people that you know that run in your circle. A few of them come from one of the groups that we're part of now together, the 100 Coaches through Marshall's group. So I'm going to have us talk a little bit about that on the show. But besides the introduction I gave you there, if you were in a quick description of yourself at a cocktail party and someone was intrigued a minute enough to hear about you, what would you want them to know about you, Mitchell, that wasn't in your initial bio here that we can start off with the audience and might give me some nuggets to dig deeper in with you?
So, Steve, what I'm going to do is thank you for the opportunity, and I'm going to present the way I would present my purpose. And so I'm going to say it this way. The types of clients typically attracted to me, businesses that feel invisible. And normally, Steve, when I stop on that, what's interesting is the person on the other side. If I'm looking, if you're just listening to this, hey, is that intriguing? Do I want to know more? If I'm looking at you, is this something that it's a playground that you might want to play in? Or is it something where you're like, well, I know somebody to recommend. Mm-hmm. And then when I add more, that's when you say, tell me more. And we can either do this now or do this later. Typically what happens is what I'll say, the most important thing to think through is having interviewed 500 thought leaders on credibility, I uncovered a very interesting secret. And that is most of what we've been taught wrong is some marketing cookie cutter approach to life and business. And it's, let's not say right or wrong, we'll just say it's not credible. And as a result, my role for the rest of my life is to help us learn, grow, and to tip the scale between those in the world that are credible and those that are not credible, which you know I call dubious.
Yes, yes. And what are your criteria for this very distinct, well thought out, researched plan that you're putting forth in the world on credibility? What makes someone credible? What makes someone not so credible?
Well, let's start with there's a couple different ways to answer that question. So I'll do the high level from a formulaic perspective. The definition of credibility is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked. And under each one of those pillars are 10 particular skill sets. So, Steve, it's an interesting thing because it's in many cases, there's not an absolute right or wrong. There's not one of the things I did a TED Talk. It was one of the 28th most
Done a few of
successful,
those,
most
haven't you?
popular TED Talk.
You're here.
I
You're
did two so
pretty
far.
master of that, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you saw the TED Talk and said,
Yeah,
no,
you're actually excellent at it.
Yeah. And so one of them, the one that was recent in 2021, it was the 28th most popular, is we are losing our humanity, and I'm tired of watching it happen. And one of the things that's important to think about credibility, and when I say right or wrong, it's not right or wrong, black or white, red or blue. There's always gradations, right? So let me give you two skills that are important for credibility that if you don't have either, you really borderline dubious or the other side. And this is 2 of 10. One of the things that's terribly important is to be a servant leader, right? So if you're there 100% serving yourself, so those people, hedonistic, narcissistic, you are by definition way more on the dubious side. All right, let me give you number 2. Being coachable. You ever run into that person that they don't want to hear anything about what you want to say?
Yeah.
They have the right answer. If you're not coachable, you're not credible.
That's awesome. Well, and that is this thing that you've evolved into, that you've tried, one of the things you and I've talked about many times is one of the taglines in my business is helping people transition, transform, and evolve to their highest good in life and business. And this has really become an evolution for you. I mean, your background in massive marketing in different arenas for different businesses, publishing, evolving in your own publishing business, and the doing well by doing good of the transformation stuff for you, of really higher purpose, higher meaning. You really embody this graph that I have, or if anyone's seeing it on the screen: transition, transform, evolve. And your credibility, I look at this like it's the top of your pyramid. You just said for the rest of your life, you plan on doing this. And the servant leadership is something that you and I resonated very much together about. So can you give people that don't quite know what that means about servant leadership? Because some people say, well, I'm not a servant. I'm X, or I'm this. So how, if people don't even know that they might be in servant leadership, or if someone's really trying to get more focused and consciously into servant leadership, what does that mean to you?
By the way, I hadn't heard that before. I've heard people. So it's a phrase, servant leadership. There are people in the world who go immediately. They know exactly what that is. What's interesting is I've heard people say, "Oh, Mitchell, I can never be a servant leader because," are you ready? "I'm not a leader." But I've never heard anyone say, "I'm not a servant."
Yeah. And it's that ego thing about people because when people are in high positions that I've met that are obviously, to me, leaders, sometimes I say, "Oh, you look to be like you're really focused on servant leadership." And sometimes, "What do you mean?" Or they are not in servant leadership. And I've asked them about it. And I have people point blank said to me, "I'm not a servant." And their ego is that, "Hey, I'm the CEO. I'm the president. I'm the owner. I'm not a servant." And I went, wow, you are really missing the whole mark of the importance of that. So the servant part they took as less than, versus you and I take that as highest of.
Yeah, it's really simple. If I'm going to say being a servant leader means that when you enter any situation, you're of service to the other people with you.
Yeah.
If you're the CEO of the company, you're of service to all stakeholders, right? You have service to all your employees. You're of service to your customers. You're of service to those companies that you work with, your partners. And if you have that approach, if you think of how can I make life better for all those around me, by definition, life is better for you.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and I told her, when you helped me fine tune some of the things in the book and the concepts of my book, The Iggy Principles, you and I talked a lot about servant leadership, and we talked a lot about my belief in spirituality and the importance of me bringing spiritual intelligence into conversations with people, into the world. And you picked up on that right away and really, had your own version of that and your own thing, and you helped me really get this Iggy. We talked about Iggy moments, which Noelle is showing here. Our engineer is showing this, but also the book. You really were instrumental in helping me get the book cover fine-tuned, and then you really encouraged me to put the symbol on the book that we have. That was one of the tattoos that I have, which is one and only tattoo that I got in my 50s that I never thought I would get. So you're seeing, hey, how to be a servant leadership, and your marketing knowledge help bring that together. And you exude, Noelle has up here that, for me, that is about gratitude and forgiveness and paying it forward, and integrity. So that really ties really well into what you're doing. And for you, your writings as your own, your own author, I think you've done over 60 plus books. I know we have a slide here of some of your books, and it's hard to say which one of these, it's like your kids, which one is your, when people say, what are your kids if you have more than one kid? And I know you're a father as well, but as looking at these books that you've written, in the first book, the 10th book, the 30th book, the 50th book, how did your evolution happen from authorship to the evolution of how you've written and then to where you are today? Can you give us we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left in this segment, but I want to understand for the listeners or viewers how your own journey of walking your talk as an author and then in the publishing business, how you've evolved in your own consciousness of writing what you write about now.
You've got about 25 questions in that.
And I know you always pick 1 or 2, so then that's what you'll do. You know that about me by now, Mitchell. It's like I throw it out and then you pick what works and you bring it back to me.
Steve, I so adore you. So, that let me start. We'll try to do this super quick for time. The first book I ever did was in the decision that I was making of should I buy a house or not. So this was back in the early 80s. So this is when publishing was late 80s. This is when publishing was really vital. And I spent so much time, money, and energy doing the analysis that I actually wrote a book called Home Ownership, The American Myth. Had a spreadsheet along with it. I was actually working for a company at the time. At the time, I was working for Sun Microsystems. So they were from my financial sponsor. And I did so much stuff to get the book out there, get written about by the largest financial real estate writer, syndicated writer in the country, which, by the way, he hated the book, which was actually beautiful because there are a lot of people who didn't like him. And so it all went well. But I think what happened is at the time, the name of the publishing company was Mythbreakers. And even back then, I was thinking to myself, let's examine a topic that everyone says you have to go a certain direction. And I wanted to determine, am I going to go that direction because everyone says so, or is it something to think about? So let's fast forward from my first book to not my last one, but Credibility Nation, one of my last books. So many times we are not credible. So many times we do things that people encourage us to do because that's the way it's always been done.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's credible. So the phrase I like to say, Steve, is we have marketing cookie cutter approaches that we follow and we shouldn't. So how did I get here? What I'm going to say is, if you ever have time to get your own PhD, I'm going to say the PhD in the School of Hard Knocks.
Yes.
Take the approach of interviewing 500 thought leaders. And for me, it was somewhere around 95% of the way done that I had this incredible aha moment of what I needed to do the rest of my life.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, I'm not sure many people can say that they've interviewed 500 thought leaders. And before that, I know you were doing interviews in different ways. So I want to come back from the break here that we got to jump into with the listeners and the viewers and find out, of those people, as you were interviewing thought leaders, where were some of your surprising that moments with people that surprised you in a positive way? And where were a few spots that you just left that interview feeling a bit disappointed that you were like, oh, my hero was not quite living up to what I thought? So if anyone wants to know about that, come back and spend some time with Mitchell and I. We'll be right back. And thanks for listening in on the Alchemy of Business. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business, where we are helping people make wiser decisions, find greater profits in their life, in their businesses, and most importantly, in my view, finding higher purpose in who you are and what you do and how you contribute to the world. And we were talking with Mr. Mitchell Levy before we jumped to the break. And one of the things he was talking about was that he's interviewed over 500 plus. He's probably inching into close to 1,000 here in the near future of thought leaders, top leaders, different people that he's either looked up to, admired, or wanted to meet. So I was asking before the break, Mitchell, of all these interviews, did you have a surprise of like, wow, that was such a golden nugget? Or, oh, that was kind of a disappointment. So give us some feedback on any, lowlights, highlights from these 500 plus interviews you've done.
So Steve, thank you. I actually, there are three points I want to make. And so the first one, this is a highlight. One of the guys I interviewed was David Meerman Scott. David is the person who invented the word newsjacking. He actually got it into the dictionary. He's one of those guys, when Tony Robbins actually does a long event, David is given 2 hours on stage. And so I'm in the green room with David. I said, David, how do I get credibility out there? What do I do? And he goes, Mitchell, invent a word. I go, cred dust. And, he goes, no, Mitchell, it took me 6 months to think about and deploy the word. I'm like, well, I know this is what thought leaders have been doing. Cred dust is that magic that happens when you share somebody else's ideas, thoughts, and actions. And so I just didn't know if it was 1D or 2. And so the reason I love this, Steve, is it was one of those ideas that was easy to take action on and has affected my life. And I've created a couple other words as well. But so that was one. It was David Meerman Scott, very positive one. Do you mind if I'll give you a negative one?
Yeah, let's go to a low light, because sometimes it's when you're out interviewing either people you admire or you look up to or you think are doing really cool things, and you go, oh man, you hang up. And sometimes I'm wondering what the low light might have been.
Yeah, well, I'm not a person to share names and paint people in a negative way.
So
what I'm going to say is I was interviewing. I had on the schedule somebody to interview, which was a high-paid NSA class speaker. And the first question I ask when people join the interview, by the way, at the end of the day, this is a cool product. It's 5 questions in 5 minutes. Imagine being able to answer 5 questions in 5 minutes and get people to trust, know, and like you in 5 minutes if they don't know you. I mean, spectacular. First question I ask is, what is your CPOP? What is your customer point of pain? This is a way, we'll cover this in a future segment. This is a way in which we could articulate our purpose in 10 words or less. So I said to this guy, hey, what's your CPOP? And he goes and answered a question that was like 30 seconds long. Now, just to be clear, most people answer it between 1 to 3 seconds. It's always 10 words or less. And I said, well, most people, what they do is they give who they serve and the pain point they address. And he was able to condense it from 30 seconds to 15. And then I asked
a very 50%, and that's a pretty good cut.
Oh, it was a good cut, but it was still his elevator pitch.
I see.
And so I asked magic words. Magic words is, do you mind if I do a little bit of coaching? And his response was, yes, I do. This is what he said. I mean, he was articulate. I have my way of doing things and you appear to have yours, and I don't want to learn yours.
At least he was honest.
So first of all, let me tell you all the cool things that came out of that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. When a low light, I always say, okay, what came out of that? What's the good?
Oh my God.
Came out of that? What's the Iggy that came out of that?
It was incredible. Prior to that point, one of the skills, I did not have the skill of being coachable as one of the skills that's necessary to be credible. And so one of the things, I don't know if you mentioned, I sat on the board of a NASDAQ firm for 9 years. And can if I'm looking around the other board members, could I possibly have imagined that we would want the CEO to hire somebody on their staff, the CEO, who would not listen to their peers, who would not listen to clients because they knew the right answer?
Right.
If you're not coachable, you're not credible.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and our friend and, part of we mentioned that we're both part of the 100 coaches thing that Marshall Goldsmith put together. I've known Marshall for 20 plus years, and he started this 100 coaches group, which is now more than a couple hundred. It really is more that 100% mindset than it is just about 100 people. But Marshall's whole business model, he's one of the top executive coaches, if not the top executive coach in the world globally. And he goes in that boards hire him, and he's hired by Fortune 500 boards for people like that you're talking about, that may be phenomenal at driving revenue, may be phenomenal of getting stock shares up to a certain price, but they are a pain in the ass. They alienate everyone. They are, and sometimes they're not coachable. And I think Marshall uses some of that approach in his own 360 stakeholder coaching. If the person's not coachable, no matter how much they're paying Marshall, he's like, no, next, this person is not coachable. So hopefully all of us can learn from that ego over Iggy thing of edging good out or edging God out, or, inviting good or God in is crucial. And I love that you've incorporated that into your cred dust as well. And you're known for making up these words. I know when you and I were working on Iggy and some of the stuff in the book, you were definitely challenging me to come up with words and acronyms that meant certain things. So did that come from your publishing background and author and writer of playing with words? Or are you like a crossword puzzle guy on Sundays that you sit with a paper and drink your coffee and try and make words? Or where did that come from, this creation of word mindset?
That's a great question. I've never thought about it. I'm going to say sometimes there are things that you might be born with, so being a visionary and is a skill set that you're born with. It's also one you could build. But being a visionary means, I know where it was born. I think I was born with it, but every job I had, everything I've done, I've always been, although I'm one of those really silly Americans who only speak one language, it's English, and it's bad English at that.
Yes,
right?
I can relate.
But what I can speak is I could speak board. I could speak accounting. I could speak finance. I could speak marketing. I could speak sales. I could speak engineering. Having been in Silicon Valley for 35 years, I speak engineering, right? And I've always been the intermediary. So I've always been the one to tie things together. And what I realized is the more succinct you could be in your messaging, the easier it is to get people to work around it. Yeah. And so that's kind of where that came from, is trying to find ways where people could understand what you want to say and remember what you want to say.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, and you challenge people on that in different ways. I mean, you challenge people to make sure that their CPOP is fine-tuned so they can do exactly what you just said, that you remembered, and that it has impact and it ties in your purpose. And you've also created that in challenging them individually, one-on-one in conversations. You also seem to have liked now public and group challenges. And from what I understand, you have 5-day challenges that you do in different ways in different times. And what's the one about now that's most relevant to you? For those of you that are viewing, you can see his day 5 challenges here right on the screen. But for those that can't see it, Mitchell, tell us a little bit about that. And we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, and then we're going to have a break, but we'll come back and dig further off, obviously, with you on other topics as we move forward.
Perfect. Well, so I mentioned, I'd say 3 things that came from the interview. The one was that they're all positive and the creation of new words. The second was the new skill set called coaching. The third is, and first I'm going to tell you depressing and why the 5-day challenge was born. The depressing was, imagine if in the creation of this thing called a CPOP, in the creation of being able to, the CPOP, it's just a word. Think of it as a approach in which you can articulate your purpose in 10 words or less. It's either customer point of pain, customer point of pleasure, customer point of purpose. It just depends. But it's, as a servant leader, who do you serve and how could you articulate what they're looking for in 10 words or less? Mm-hmm. It really is that simple, Steve. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so what I'm going to say, and this is depressing for me, and this is what I am working on fixing. Imagine with all the people I interviewed, and with this particular process, it's now over 600. Imagine with those particular people that potentially for the first time ever, they've been able to articulate their purpose in 10 words or less. And this is when I say that, it's not just that they say it, they feel it. It is alignment. It is inviting good in. It's inviting God in. It's bringing in such a way that they're in alignment in terms of who they are, what they do.
Yes, yes.
I would say to you that 90% lost that word, that phrase, that CPOP, 90% lost that somewhere between 2 hours and 2 weeks. Because Steve, what happens is they go to their friends. Oh my God, I just talked with Mitchell Levy and my CPOP is this, or my purpose is this. And the person looks them in the eye and they're not doing it out of malice. They look him in the eye and said, no, that's not you. You're something else. And the person, even though for the first time ever, they've really felt good about articulating their purpose for the first time ever, that was powerful for them. But somebody else said, no, that's not you. You're somebody else. And they let it go. So the 5-day challenge, if you want to bring that slide back up, is 5 days. It's an hour a day. And we run this same challenge every quarter. And so it's typically the first week of the third month of the quarter. And what it does is helps you align your purpose on and offline. It's the coolest thing. So you can take a CPOP course. It's part of Credibility Nation. We offer it for free. It's bundled into this 5-day challenge. So you can take the challenge for free. And the interesting part is you get your CPOP, and every day you walk up the stairs. So I'll just, for those not who are not visually seeing this, day one is researching you. What happens when people research you? Have you articulated your purpose in a way they understand it in the first 3 seconds? When they go to your social media, same sort of thing. As you've been a servant leader to others and you've helped others accomplish what they want, do you have endorsements and you show them in the appropriate place? That's the endorsing you. Day 4 is really cool. It's watching you. And then day 5 is being you. And so that's the important part, guys, is figuring out how you can align your purpose on and offline.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, we've got to go to a break, but I want to come back and talk a little bit more about the CPOP, the customer point of pain. And what I've learned over life as well is, unfortunately, whether people are selling, Excedrin, aspirins, or they're selling insurances, us as human beings seem to be reacted to make change or buy in our life through what's going to get us out or through pain versus being inspired and pulled to something, which has been my own disappointment because I love to inspire and I love to pull people to their higher calling. And for some reason, many of us as human beings, including myself at times, we need a brick upside the head to have a point of pain before we actually have change happen or we create buying habits. So let's come back and talk with the audience and or talk with you, Mitchell, with the audience hearing about this customer point of pain, your CPOP. And then let's jump in with this Credibility Nation. Let's also jump into some of the work that happens in the world with other leaders that you're seeing that's doing this in a way, in a very well-oiled machine way. And so I want to have the listeners learn more about some of the successes you've experienced and you've seen in others, and where failures and challenges maybe that you've had in your life of your own points of pain have caused some of your greatest learnings and caused you to be here today talking about these topics that are so relevant. So everyone, stay tuned, come back and learn about more pain and hopefully pleasure beyond the pain. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business. We're here with Mr. Mitchell Levy talking about business, marketing, strategy, credibility, higher purpose, higher meaning. And we were talking about before the break, pain, your CPOP, your customer point of pain. So Mitchell, as you've been all these thought leaders, the people you've helped create books, the people that you coach, bring in these challenges, what are some of the things in these customer points of pain that you have really seen elevate people to some levels of success that they weren't expecting or that you knew could be achieved? So you have any examples of people that really have had some of this incorporating into the business that have made some changes in a really positive way from these pain points?
Your how you ended the last segment and what you're using, you're really glumming onto the word pain. And what I want to say, and the answer is yes, people respond more to pain than they do to pleasure. But I want to say, but I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. So I'm going to say, Steve, that the reason I call it CPOP is because it doesn't automatically imply a pain, a pleasure, or a purpose point, right? Just to be clear, because in every situation, it's going to be different. So first, when I did 3 yesterday, when somebody comes on the line and said, Mitchell, there's no way I could possibly articulate who I am in 10 words or less because I serve this audience. Like you ever hear somebody say, I serve speakers, coaches, thought leaders, radio hosts. And, by the time it's 10 words just trying to articulate who they serve. And then when you say, what do you do? I do this, and the other thing, and you don't remember any of it. So what happens when you could focus on one primary area that is so powerful? Many things happen. And what happens when somebody has a CPOP that's very focused is they then go back in and it becomes a compass. And they look at their website, they look at their social media, they look at the meetings they run, they look at the accomplishments they want to have, and they know immediately what fits and what doesn't fit. Steve, you'll be clear. Remember when we were doing the interview for your book, one of the techniques I often use is I use something called a parking lot. So when we're talking about content that makes sense for your book, and it sounds really great. And I go, man, I love that, but I don't know if that fits. I actually know that doesn't fit in the book or doesn't have to be in your book. Let's put it in a parking lot. And what helps when you're in a conversation with somebody or you're running a meeting and somebody wants to go off topic, what's really interesting is creating a parking lot where you put things, this is important. It's just not important for right now. Well, the same thing happens when you have a CPOP. When you have a CPOP and you're meeting somebody who is a prospect and they say, hey, can you do this for me? Just because money's in hand doesn't mean you do it if it doesn't fit your CPOP.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, in this pain thing, I mean, I'm clearly somebody who likes to focus more on pleasure, higher purpose, and meaning. And pain to me, it's kind of like how I focused on the word fear in my early days. I know a lot of times I ran from fear or I did things in lieu of fear. And I realized later in my life that the more I went towards my fear, embraced it, and went through it, on the other side of that was amazing empowerment and amazing energy. So now I wake up in the morning or during the week and I say, where am I most fearful right now in my life, in relationship, in business, in opportunities, in exploration? And where do I have the most tingling in my heart and the sweats that I get of fear? And that's where I know I'm supposed to be going. So the pain point, I like to put in that kind of a category. Where sometimes has my pain been so unbearable that I haven't wanted to face it in life beyond just your marketing thing, but this pain point, because customers, sometimes it's mild pains that they're having about not making enough money. Maybe their products aren't selling. Maybe they don't have enough cash flow. Maybe they've lost a lot of employees. Maybe that they're no longer on the mission that they were when they started their business 5 or 10 years ago. Maybe their dream of building a business has become their nightmare. Whatever the pain is, I love that the CPOP can help define what that is, because just like going through fear, getting into the pain and getting beyond the pain, that's where the magic happens.
And what's interesting, I'm so glad you said what you said in the way you did, because what often happens is your CPOP is your superpower, and your CPOP is a reflection of some pain, some obstacle you've overcome at some time in your life. And so a lot of times when people are talking about their CPOP, their passion comes from the fact that they fix it for themselves and they want to make sure they help address that for other people so they can overcome it for themselves that much quicker.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of superpowers, what do you define your superpower as, or your multiple superpowers? Have you identified those for yourself?
Thanks for asking. I actually had 2 that I knew of before the interviews. Okay. You experienced both before the interviews and where I am now. So you experienced my ability to build systems. So think about this. I interviewed 500 thought leaders while still doing my job on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, 10 to 12 interviews per day. And I did that in a year. And my team we have 3 different podcasts and the team kept up. Building systems is one. The second is being able to pull the genius from somebody's head. And what that means is I'm an active listener, right? And it's just, I care and I'm interested and I want to move forward. I knew I had those 2 entering the interviews. With the interviews, there was one more that I just now so love. And it goes back to making up words. You said that before. It's clarity. It's the ability to allow people to have clarity for themselves of who they serve and what they serve, and more importantly, so it's they wake up every day, they love who they're hanging around. They wake up every day, they love what they're doing, and they wake up every day and they have joy in their life.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
to me is, if you can clearly come up with a CPOP that allows that to happen, and everyone has that, that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, that's the alchemy. To me, that's the alchemy of creating a business that's worth sustaining, growing, contributing. You can find joy and happiness in a business that also creates abundance and profit. Because most people obviously are creating businesses to drive profit. And if you're in a nonprofit, you still have to drive donations, which are profit, to have your, so it's all money makes the world go round. It's currency called for a reason. It's like energy of electricity, but tying in these words of joy, purpose, clarity, systems, processes are all elements of the alchemy to make these things work. And we only have about 1 more minute or 2 in this segment, Mitchell, and we're coming back for our last quarter of the last run here. But I wanted to ask you on the processes. Have you found that most of the businesses that you start working with already have process and they just need to make them better? Or do you find that, to your surprise, many people don't actually even have processes in place?
It's across the gap. So let's be clear. They either have a process that was homegrown and worked for a period of time and no longer works. Or let's do the opposite extreme. They have a process that was given to them by a software company and they made their company wrap around that software process. Both of those don't work. Okay. And we like to maintain something that's working and not change. And so what's appropriate about processes is every now and then, probably more of the now than then, take a look at your customer journey, take a look at your stakeholders' journey, and take a look at your processes. So customer stakeholder journey first, and figure out whether or not the processes need to be updated to make a safer, cleaner, more fun, more enjoyable process.
Awesome. Well, I love that you're talking about purpose and power and passion and process. So for those of you listening in or viewing, this is the key of life, having a process for anything you want to duplicate and grow, whether that is more joy, more money, more health, more happiness. So let's come back and talk more with Mitchell after the break. And we will have one more segment before we wrap up this show today. But Mitchell, it's been awesome. Let's keep you on fire here and keep this break short. And everybody will be right back. So thanks for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business Show. Mitchell and I have been having an amazing conversation the last 3 segments, so I hope that you're popping back in and listening. And if you're just starting from scratch, Mitchell is an expert in a lot of areas, not just in publishing, how I met him, but his own right as an author, TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, serial entrepreneur, and just a really wise guy with a big heart. So Mitchell, let's talk a little bit about some of these things in the first segments, tying it together here at the very end of this segment, because what you do is from a passion being called standpoint, even though you've had to wrap this into business structures, processes, creating profit, CPOPs, all of that. But you helped me create a book that I'd had in my heart and mind for 15 years or so. And I had my own structure and idea how I wanted that to get out, but I knew that the word Iggy, inviting good in or inviting God in versus edging good out or edging God out, that Wayne Dyer so eloquently put together, you hit on as soon as you heard about it, you were like, that fits perfectly. And when I found out the name of your company was AHA, which I love that power of that word. It was always around, but even Oprah made that word aha moments pretty powerful. So you and I talked about also creating Iggy moments for people, whether it was in the book or in life. So let's talk a little bit on this last segment about Iggy. So how do you define in your own descriptions? You're a great wordsmith person and you fine tune down. So how do you, Mitchell, describe spirituality in your own life? And what is your definition of your own spirituality incorporated into your life?
I heard somebody speak at the Secret Knock, which is Greg Reed's event. And one of the things that she mentioned is she mentioned a name. The name was Gus. And Gus represented God, universe, or spirit. And what's nice about saying Gus, you're either including everyone in or you're offending everyone because everyone thinks their stuff is the most important. But what's really cool about Gus is you could listen to Gus. And Gus is that universal spirit. Gus is that God for you, or Gus is that God. I think I got everybody. And what happens is we as humans want to understand our purpose. We want to know why we're here. And when we don't know why we're here, we don't know why we have structure. That's when chaos ensues. And the best way I could say it, how I apply it for myself, I always thought my purpose, Steve, I always thought my purpose was, okay, have a family, have a son. We have a 23-year-old successfully launched, right? Happily married for 33 years.
Congratulations again. I knew that you had a long-term one. I didn't realize it was 33.
Thank you. And I always thought is create businesses, make money, have fun. We prior to COVID, we've spent 21 years renting a house in Europe and inviting friends and family. And what came out of the interviews, what came out was this desire to tip the scale between credible and dubious, was this desire to have, because if you look at the world, it is going, I am not happy about the perception of the world I see today and the direction it's been going and continues to go. And so when I realized that was probably my calling, that was probably Gus talking to me my entire life, but it was 95% of the way through the interviews that I realized that this is something I need to do. This is something that's my purpose. This is something I need to do for the rest of my life. I have to tell you, the first thing I did, Steve, is I went to my wife. I went to my partner and I said, I'm going to do something, and this is what I've been called to do. And I believe that by doing this, I'm going to offend people in a way I've never offended people before. I'm good at offending people, by the way. But I'm going to do it in such a way.
You're so nice about it when you offend them. So,
but I'm going to do it in such a way that we might actually get haters in a way that we haven't had before, or stalkers in a way we haven't had before. And I went to my wife and I said, listen, do you have a concern about this? Because I won't do it if you say no. And her response, she is so amazing. Her response is, hey, Mitchell, if this is your calling, we'll take it when it comes. And I'd say each and every one of you, if you could find that thing in your heart, that purpose that you're going to do, regardless of how you're seeing the world, and if you could surround yourself with the type of partners, the types of friends, the type of business associates that just see you and love you and want to be part of you and want to help you accomplish what you do while you help them accomplish what they do, that's alchemy. To me, that's credibility. That's living with credibility.
It is. Well, and that's a beautiful world. I mean, there's that song, it's the Louis, who's the Louis that sang the Wonderful World song, that just reminded me of that. I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but that description of what you just said is a wonderful world. That's the world we all desire to live in, being loved, being appreciated, being accepted, surrounded by people who support you in that. And what a great partner to support you in that mission that you have. And my wife, 30 years as well, said, similar stuff. When I was telling her I was finally going to get Iggy launched and start using the God word in certain ways. Because for me, I do my Iggy, I-G-I, my G is the word God. But for me, I don't have a God image of a person in a white, outfit, so to speak, up in the universe. My definition is just God is the sum of all that is, which is energy. It's the higher consciousness and higher meaning of the sum of all it is. And my wife and I have similar, beliefs on spirituality. But when I told her I was going to write a spiritual business book, and start talking about spiritual intelligence in life and business, and she's like, knows I've been really focused on this in my own life for many, many years. But I came up with the word Iggy about 15 years ago. And when I finally got the book started, and she goes, okay, yeah, I'm behind you 100%. What's taking you so long? It's kind of like, I'm ready for whatever comes from it, and it has to come when it comes. But yeah, I'm here to, so the similar support of bring it on. And I think, being willing to be a thought leader, changer, or just speak up for things that you might get haters, then it is what it is. I'm not looking to create hate or animosity with anyone in the world. And I'm not here to define anybody's spirituality, to tell them what they need to believe or how they believe. I'm just here to bring up the conversation so that just like we are talking constantly about EQ, IQ, artificial intelligence, spirit, so to me, spiritual intelligence is one of those things that in the alchemy, we could put on the table, and it exudes through the work you're doing. I mean, spiritual intelligence and the inviting good in is so matched up with the credibility stuff. So how, with your son, who's in his early 20s, as you see this generation coming up, how did you and your wife incorporate your Gus experience and mentality carry that on into your family, either with your son or others? And so how do you perpetuate that, just like you perpetuate Credibility Nation? So I'm just curious about how you feel with bringing up children this day and age that are so susceptible to so much information. How did that process work with you I know you have a very close relationship with your son, so I was just curious about that.
Oh, everywhere, from the beginning. I would say, so first, I'm just going to throw something out there. Our educational system is completely wrong, and maybe wrong is not the right word, but it's teaching the wrong stuff. We are taught to actually be cogs in a wheel. We are taught that there's an answer in the back of the book. We are taught that we're supposed to get a job, be at a company for the rest of our lives, and at the end we'll have a retirement, and we do what we want to do when we get retired. And guess what? Today's generation is saying, bullshit, I'm not interested. Okay. So when my son came to me at different points in time and asked questions, my response was from one of two hats. And I wear the fedora, so I have many different hats. But my response was either from the hat as dad or the hat as friend. Mm-hmm. And he understood both. And so we did that from the time he was young. And occasionally when he was young, he'd come to me and said, Dad, I need to tell the friend I can't tell dad, so dad's not here. Like, okay. And my only response was, well, if it's something I need to tell mom, I'll tell her. And he goes, okay. Right. And, the interesting part, and probably the most important thing that I shared with him, was his ability to have discernment. Because in today's world, the way the internet has come about is marketers have been able to define a strategy that the world you see is the world that you want to see, and it propagates potentially a view of the world that's not a view of somebody else in the world. So the reason we have hate is we have people on different sides who are only seeing reinforced messages on their side. So with my son, the question was, well, when somebody gives you a piece of information, do you have multiple sources? Does it feel good? Does it fit within your paradigm? Is it something you should check? Can you determine if this is something that you should do? Does it feel comfortable with you and your friends? Mm-hmm. And I think my wife and I were really good along the way of giving him a sense of home, a sense of heart, a sense of love, a sense of servant leadership for others, and a sense of questioning. So I'll leave a word for you to think about, and it's being curious. Mm-hmm. Can't be credible if you're not curious.
Yeah.
And so a sense of curiosity, if somebody says, for instance, starting with my first book, you should buy a house.
Right.
And everyone says, buy a house. And you're like, okay, but why? And why does everyone have to buy, right? Anytime somebody says something and it's absolute, it's a good time to say why. I love the question why. I'll leave you with this one. As a parent, so many parents say, God, my kid always asks why they don't like it. I'm like, why? Like the coolest thing in the world is
why?
Yeah. Why?
The power of why.
Not why?
The power of why is powerful. Well, we're going to wrap up the segment here, Mitchell. And I want to ask you about beyond there is a lot of hate in the world, and in opposite, there's a lot of joy. So I want to come back and just ask you as we wrap up, how can people create more joy? But before we sign off, we're going to have in the show notes how to reach you on various websites and things. But what do you think is the best way for someone to reach you if they wanted to write a book or they wanted to learn about more credibility issues? Is there one spot they should start, a website or a social media page in connecting with you?
There's one spot. Just go to my primary page, mitchellevy.com. You could book time on my calendar. You could have access to the 5-day challenge. So come and join us in a 5-day challenge. We're very intimate with those people who come to the challenge. Join Credibility Nation. It is a beautiful way for you to surround yourself with other people who are on the credibility journey. And I'd say the one thing regarding love and hate, love is better. And if you are credible, you will try your best to be servant leaders, to be coachable, to have the intent and commitment to do the right thing, to be likable by those around you because you're spreading cred dust and you're respectful of those you interchange with. All of those elements and more are things that you can learn more about through either the book Credibility Nation, or come and join us at Credibility Nation. Watch the TEDx, which is We Are Losing Our Humanity. And aren't you tired of it? Because I'm tired of it happening. Let's fix that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. We'll make sure we reach out that way. That'll be in the show notes. And then, Mitchell, as we wrap up here, what advice or quick point would you have for people, how they could create more joy in their life? What's one or two things that you think can spark or stimulate more joy in one's life?
Make somebody else smile. Really, honestly, if you have a power and you're good at it, share it with others. The coolest thing in the world for me is to sit with somebody, if it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes, and help them articulate their CPOP. And I can see the ramifications of their transformation. You want to bring joy to somebody else? Bring them something they want, not a gift, bring them something that makes their heart sing.
Yeah, the go-getter, the go-giver, and being of servant leadership. Well, thank you for that. Mr. Mitchell Levy here has been just an amazing guest. Credibility Nation, publishing, all kinds of stuff that he does. It'll be in the show notes. Mitchell, I can't thank you enough for continuing to put good in the world, to bring good forth, to be your own powerful servant leader for so many, and for helping bless me on getting my book, The Iggy Principles, launched. And we are so thrilled that you are going to continue to just get started and elevate this to a high level, because I know this is the beginning stages of something that is really becoming a movement. So thank you for joining us today on the Alchemy of Business Show.
My pleasure. It is always amazing to see you. And I loved hanging with you and watching you grow too. So we're going to do this together, Steve.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. And until next time, thanks again.
And that concludes this episode of The Alchemy of Business with your host, Steve Rodgers. If you found value in today's broadcast, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing with friends, and leaving a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next Thursday for another episode. Be blessed and see you soon.